Spawn/Batman may be a one-shot comic, but it's a crucial piece of a larger and iconic puzzle. This team-up is the brainchild of the legendary Frank Miller, with artwork by the talented Todd McFarlane. Miller has stated that it's part of the same universe as his iconic work, The Dark Knight Returns, although it's set much earlier. In this story, Batman heads to New York to investigate a gruesome case involving beheaded homeless individuals. The Caped Crusader's not in the best of moods, and he quickly crosses paths with none other than Spawn, the guardian of the rough Rat City streets in the Big Apple. Let's just say Batman isn't exactly Mr. Congeniality in this story. He's constantly trash-talking Spawn, while dishing out some serious punishment. Naturally, when two iconic heroes clash, they eventually set aside their differences. In this video, we will explore this awesome comic that is equal parts dark and humorous. So without further ado, let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. From Gotham to New York. This story begins in Gotham City on a cold, dark night. The unforgiving wind engulfed the merciless city that Batman struggled to protect with his life, resources, and everything else that was his. At the waterfront, the lapping of briny waves against the wooden pilings muffled the sounds of curses and gunshots. No one could really hear the horrid pounding, the shrieks of pain, or the dull moans that originated from Batman's fight with his enemies. He found himself fighting a bunch of criminals who had gotten hold of weapons sold to them by agents of a fallen dictatorship. The weapons had been built for a war that never happened, and now that they had no purpose, they were being sold to others. Batman's foes tonight had been left behind as broken things, but true horror lay ahead. Apart from the high-tech weapons and devices that he found himself battling an insectoid cyborg. Batman was already injured, and facing this monstrous cyborg was not helping him. However, Batman found himself a pair of gloves, humming with the promise of power. He used it against the robot, which was equal parts lethal and stupid. Batman did not waste any time studying the gloves or how they worked, and he quickly put them on. As he did that, he only wished that the Soviet scientist who made them knew what he was doing. After putting the gloves on, Batman felt a surge of superhuman strength and a wave of confidence because of the neural enhancer lock. As the robot hunched, taking aim and building a charge that could evaporate Batman, the Caped Crusader landed a massive super punch on the robot. The robot staggered confusedly. Batman had shattered its visor, and that's when he saw the only human element about the robot, an eye attached to a head. Although this human was confused, it continued to charge Batman. It was like wrestling a jackhammer. In the end, Batman did get the upper hand. However, he found something curious about this human head controlling the cyborg body. The head was speaking English, despite the cyborg being of Soviet origin. In fact, the English came with a thick Brooklyn accent. Left defeated, the cyborg's self-destruct was activated, so Batman detached the human head from the cyborg and made a quick getaway. The Dark Knight takes the head to his damp and echoing Batcave, where he begins analyzing his strange discovery. There were no fingerprints because, well, there were no fingers to begin with. However, Batman was called the world's greatest detective for a reason. He took DNA samples from the teeth of this cyborg operating head and ran it through his database, only to learn that the head once belonged to a man named Louis Bachuk, a vagrant and acute alcoholic last seen in Manhattan and was presumed dead since. So, what was the brain of a New York bum doing inside a Soviet cyborg? Well, there was only one way to find out. Next thing we know, Batman has found himself on the rooftops of New York City. The Spawn of Hell meets the Dark Knight of Gotham City, but a lot was cooking in Batman's world. Firstly, Dr. Margaret Love, the founder and president of the Heal the World organization, was awarded a prize for her humanitarian work with the city's homeless population. Apparently, she had been transforming their lives through not just food and shelter, but also through self-actualization and empowerment. It almost sounds too good to be true. Why do I say so? Well, strangely, a character with the same name and similar personality was also the villain of the RoboCop comics that Frank Miller had written. And this time around, Dr. Margaret Love was the primary antagonist. Nevertheless, in New York, Batman's hunt for gun peddlers began, but a woman's scream split the night, drawing Batman's attention. He was immediately reminded of the horror the little boy experienced when a mugger's bullets pierced through the flesh of a couple named Thomas and Martha Wayne. He did not want that fate to befall anyone else. He paused his hunt for a while and focused on saving the woman from whatever evil she had found herself in. Among the dregs of humanity, Batman listened closely for any clues he could find. Mostly, he heard nonsense, but every now and then, he would eavesdrop on legends like that of Al, a city bum who supposedly possessed magical powers. Batman was about to face another night creature that glided through Manhattan's concrete canyons on a quest of his own. He is essentially a dead man brought back to life, a slave of hell who seeks redemption. And this time around, some of his friends were missing. Not very far away from the city's hustle, bustle, and busy life was an alleyway where a homeless man was fast asleep. But to ruin his good sleep came two sick jerks, a couple of perps who were about to get the taste of hell firsthand. They poured gasoline on this poor man and were preparing to light him up alive. However, the fire did not touch the homeless man. Instead, it came after these two perps. It was pure magic, magic from hell, and they knew it. It wasn't before long that Spawn revealed his presence and unleashed his wrath on them. To Spawn, this was justice delivered quickly, but to Batman, who came late to the party, Spawn was committing a wanton murder. There's one good thing about murderers. If you're a good guy, you do not feel bad about taking a cheap shot at them, like getting good momentum from a 30-foot drop and driving your heel into the murderer's guts. That's what Batman did to Spawn. Had it been someone else, they'd find themselves crippled for several months. But not Spawn. He pivoted expertly and delivered a kick of his own to leave Batman struggling for breath. The two of them fight each other with all their might, trying to see who'll break first. Even if their bodies broke, their spirits were another deal altogether. Spawn asked Batman to knock it off, but Batman is relentless. The Dark Knight uses his nerve gas, enough to put a mob to sleep. But all it did to Spawn was slow him down a bit, nothing more. You know what? Spawn was way more powerful than Batman, at least physically and power-wise. However, he did not wish to use his magical abilities against Batman, assuming that it would count as cheating. Batman also realizes the same. For him, it was retreat or die, and if he was dead, he would not be able to help anyone. I am sure Spawn would disagree. So, Batman escapes Spawn's clutches, leaving him under the influence of the nerve gas, but he promises to return. Spawn makes the first strike. Batman gets fooled. Batman manages to go 10 blocks before his knees give out. He spends the next few minutes teaching himself how to breathe without coughing. He relocates his right arm before resting in a dark alley. At least the pain was ensuring that he was not thinking about the recent humiliation. He was not accustomed to losing, but he did. Meanwhile, Al Simmons, aka Spawn, came to the New York office of HEAL, the organization headed by Margaret Love. Interestingly, the building was old and crumbling. The door looked like it would break if you leaned against it. But once you scraped off the fake rust, you'd find this state-of-the-art security system. The junkie had told Spawn that you could check into the building, but you could not check out. It seems that the junkie's words had some basis. Whatever the building was, it was being used for more than just feeding the homeless. Spawn entered the building to explore what secrets it hid when he heard oiled service whirring behind him. Almost silently. It was another robot, similar to the one that Batman had fought back in Gotham. Like Batman, Spawn did not take much time to beat it to a pulp. Much like Batman did, Spawn also finds a head inside the robot. This time around, it is Spawn's friend Chuck. Spawn was shocked to see the sorry state of his friend. Batman was unbothered when he saw his first cyborg controlling head. He only saw it as a piece of evidence. But clearly, Spawn had more heart. Despite being dead, he could feel more emotions than Batman. Nevertheless, a television started broadcasting a pre-recorded message from Margaret Love. It was for the men and women she had been providing shelter to. Her voice was almost hypnotizing. She first acknowledged and appreciated people for their hard work, and went on to speak about a final step. Prepare to shed your poisoned bodies and become perfect servants of society, free from guilt and pain, free from choice. It seems Spawn had previously had an encounter with Margaret Love and knew that she was anything but a nice woman. Spawn unleashed Hell's forces and energy into the building of death, destroying it and reducing it to rubble. Amidst this, Batman saw a familiar sight in this strange land, the bat signal. Seeing a call for help over the skyline of Manhattan, Batman rushed towards it, only to meet Dr. Margaret Love. She tells him that Spawn was caught on security cameras, destroying her beautiful humanitarian mission. I am surprised that Batman fell for it and promised her that he would be stopped. Furthermore, she tells him that the same evening, there would be a fundraiser aboard her organization's ship, and it was rumored that the president would attend the event. She was asking Batman for his help, and it turned out that he promised to extend this help. The common enemy. Spawn returned to the filthy alley he called home so lovingly. Still under the influence of the nerve gas, Spawn was determined to finish Batman the same way he would finish Margaret Love. You see, Spawn was under the impression that Batman was working for her, aiding her in her nefarious activities. But he was wrong. On the other hand, the evil doctor had ensured that Batman saw Spawn as the enemy, the criminal who kills people and destroys buildings doing humanitarian work. None of them was one to back down, and both of them were hungry to make each other pay. Batman arrived to confront Spawn. This time around, He was wearing the same gloves that had given him super strength in Gotham. The fight was going to be an equal one. Batman wouldn't even have to hold back his punches, for he knew that Spawn was a sink for incoming punishment. The two of them fought relentlessly, trying to break each other's backs, but no clear winner was in sight. Interestingly, both of them were trash-talking, calling each other punk, sloppy, stupid, taunting each other for not being able to get up, and whatnot. Started to feel like they were two teens fighting in an alley. Nevertheless, when they had beaten each other to a pulp, the alley shuddered with the cyborg mind slave sent by Margaret Love to make sure there were no loose ends. If Batman and Spawn were dead, she could not be exposed or stopped. The cyborgs inflict more injuries, breaking Batman's jaw and puncturing his artery. Spawn could see that if he did something quickly, Batman would be lost forever. He reached deep within himself to find the strength to stay conscious and the will to rise and summon the power of hell. Spawn blasted the cyborgs and tended to Batman, who was in shock and calling Spawn names. Batman had lost almost all his blood, and his heart had nearly stopped. It would have taken a miracle to save him, and a miracle is what Spawn performed. But he needed to reconcile with Batman, and given how thick he was acting, Spawn had to get into Batman's head. I love Frank Miller for the humor he has managed to put in, despite the dark nature of the comic. Here's a little excerpt to give you a sense. You see, this is the kind of argument these two were having, and it went on for a while. Nevertheless, they managed to reconcile, as all superheroes and crossover comics do, and began their hunt for the common enemy. The final strike. The president was late to the party, but everybody who was anybody did arrive on time. Margaret insisted that everyone try their punch, a non-alcoholic drink that tickles the nose and makes the mind very open to suggestion. Her voice did the rest. She began her speech by talking about her childhood experiences and how they affected her decision to dedicate every living hour to public service. She was also deeply concerned about the widespread apathy, crime, hunger, and bigotry. Interestingly, the distinguished people present at the fundraiser, including the vice president, were greatly influenced by Margaret's speech. But it was not a surprise. A sympathetic sob from the Attorney General, a low murmur of sad agreement from a senator, the Vice President nodding vigorously. It all seemed so normal. In fact, they agreed to just about anything she had to say, even when she blurted out that the real problem behind the sorry state of the earth was the humans, whom she described as the sweating, farting, meat-eating, land-destroying, cruel, stupid, murderous people. Right about then, with a rumble, a 12-ton hatch glided open. Inside this hatch were hundreds of missiles capable of starting a war that would grow and grow until the fire was everywhere. So, she wanted to annihilate the human population with these missiles, in an attempt to free the world from the evil of humanity. A hush fell over the crowd, but it was soon taken over by jubilant applause. Arriving 20 minutes late, the President of the United States took the first sip of the punch, and soon enough, his friends were filling in his glass. Meanwhile, Batman and Spawn were hard at work. Spawn was not a fan of microphone, so in order to communicate with Batman, he simply got into the Caped Crusader's head, which of course, pissed Batman off further. Fighting their way through a mini army of guards and breaking through walls and doors, Batman and Spawn inched closer to their destination, determined to stop Dr. Margaret Love from executing her grand plan of global destruction. They had to contend with the cyborgs and other similar walls of defense. But the two heroes were not one to back down. Spawn was not very careful with one of the explosives, and it, well, exploded. With the explosion that went down, Margaret Love, the woman, knew she was about to die, and her flawed dream of a better world was going to die with her. However, she had one last card to play, and one last weapon. She pressed a button and launched a nuke, set to target the center of New York City. The ballistic missile was racing towards its target. Something had to be done, but Batboy was helpless right now. Stopping the missile would require a miracle, and here comes the Spawn. With a surge of hell power, Batman and Spawn were ripped to atoms, shredded, and rebuilt. The two of them had teleported on the missile. One wrong move, and they would actually be turned into atoms, this time more permanently. However, somehow, Batman found the time to ask Spawn to get off his cape. No one stepped on his cape. Somehow, Batman managed to disable the nuke and divert the course of the missile into the water. And there you have it. They saved New York, and probably the world had been saved. But Batman simply could not let go of his weird, egoistic behavior. In fact, at the end of the comic, Spawn offers a hand of truce, but Batman throws his batarang straight into Spawn's face, impaling it. Marvelous verdict. The two heroes' conflicting methods and approaches make it clear from the get-go that Spawn and Batman aren't going to be best buddies. Spawn/Batman leans into this tension in a way that feels more genuine than Batman's beef with Superman in Miller's writing. It's also the classic pattern of a crossover. They fight first and then team up. And guess what? The legacy of this book goes beyond its own pages. Spawn's face scar, seen in later issues, is often believed to be a result of a batarang, though it's more likely Houdini did the deed in another comic. In the same year, we got Batman/Spawn, War Devil. another crossover. There was even talk of a third storyline, but it never saw the light of day. The two heroes' collaborations even made their mark in the Mortal Kombat 11 video game, with Spawn acknowledging Batman as a friend. And now there's a new crossover in the work, bringing Batman and Spawn together once again. None of this would have happened if not for the original Spawn/Batman from 1994. It was a smart move to combine these two beloved characters, riding on their popularity and the creative talents behind the book. This unlikely alliance has left a lasting impact, inspiring stories that continue to this day. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.